Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive coverage. The idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have three quick but important announcements. To help UPSC beginners, those who are preparing for 2027 and beyond, Unacademy will be conducting a free special class festival on the 28th and 29th of March. In these free special classes, which will be held on the Unacademy app, our top educators will be discussing the strategy that you need to follow to prepare for 2027 exams, be it the understanding of the syllabus or the book source and the materials that are needed, or the various strategy that you need to adopt to prepare for this competitive exam. So do ensure you catch these sessions, especially if you're a beginner, it would be of immense help. And those of you who are looking to enroll for our classes, a new batch has started from 23rd March, the summit batch, and this would be the right opportunity for you to begin these classes because Unacademy is providing a flat 55% off with up to 6 months of free extension. The subscription is available at just 17,999, which is roughly 833 rupees per month, and I'm told that this offer will end tonight. So those interested, please click on the link provided in the description box below. And on the page, you might see a different fee. So to avail the discount, you have to enter the code IAS English. Then one last announcement with regard to Conquer Prelims Phase 4, which is designed to help prelims aspirants who are preparing for the upcoming prelims exam. So under Conquer Prelims Phase 4, we are covering high-yielding topics from various subjects. And you can see the detailed timetable over here. Every day, three classes are taking place at 12 p.m., 3 p.m., and 6 p.m. And these classes are also on the Unacademy app. You just have to search for the educator profile with their names. And under the free special classes tab, you will be able to find these classes to be scheduled. So with this, let's get started with the discussion of the Hindu newspaper and look at the first topic. On page number 10, there are two articles that focuses on the recent elections in Nepal. I know we have covered this topic, but these two articles provide some fresh insight into the India-Nepal relationship. It will help us understand the political dynamics of Nepal and how India should recalibrate its bilateral ties with Nepal. So we will go into the details of this article. We have a column on the same page written by K.V. Rajan, the former Indian ambassador to Nepal. So I'll make use of both the articles and I'll give you information beyond the articles as well so that we will cover this topic comprehensively. So recently, Nepal went through a historic election where the people of Nepal have expressed their aspirations by delivering a terrific mandate, a two-third majority to a new party, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party. And its new leader, Balendra Shah, has essentially delivered a political earthquake in this Himalayan nation. Because Balendra Shah is not your average politician, right? We all know how politicians function across the world. They're desperate for votes. They go to any extent to campaign, to beg for votes from the voters. But Balendra Shah was very different. He did none of this during his campaign. In fact, his background itself is very, very interesting. He is hardly 35 years old, one of the youngest politicians in the world to emerge as a victorious leader. Engineer formerly, later became a popular rapper, especially on platforms like TikTok. So he already had a connect with Nepal's youth. And this is very important because Nepal is one of the youngest countries in the world with a median age of 25 years. So after turning into a rapper from an engineering background, he entered politics and became the mayor of Kathmandu, that too as an independent candidate. not with the backing of any traditional political party. Because see, in Nepal, you have several traditional parties which are deeply entrenched in Nepal's politics. But Balendra Shah does not belong to any of these old traditional political parties or political dynasties. So he went on to become the mayor of Kathmandu as an independent candidate and started pushing much needed administrative reforms, projected himself as a technocratic leader, someone who would not ignore the concerns of the people and try and address the aspirations of the people by focusing on technocratic governance and administration. That was the image he had cultivated for himself. But last year, Nepal saw the biggest shift in September 2025 when the youth of the country they rebelled against the old political establishment through the Gen Z protests, which even turned violent, and they even toppled the then government under KP Sharma Oli. KP Oli belongs to one of the traditional political parties in Nepal, the Communist Party of Nepal, the Unified Marxist Leninist faction, which is often seen as a pro China party. And KP Oli was often considered to be a pro China leader. He was known for his anti India political position, he was known for breeding anti India sentiments. He even escalated the boundary issues over Kalapani and Susta. So India had a problematic equation with KP Oli and his party, but the overall protest that we saw last year in Nepal was not just against the incumbent government, it was against traditional politics. It was against the old guard of Nepal's political establishment. The youth in Nepal have been frustrated for many, many years, for many decades, because see, the country has seen a lot of instability. In fact, since 1980s, Nepal has been going through crisis after crisis. It witnessed repeated protests by Madhesis who would block the border roads between India and Nepal, and this would cripple Nepal's economy. Then Nepal would often consider India's foreign policy as coercive. It believed that India was interfering in its internal politics. That was the long held accusation against India. Though India had good ties with Nepal's then monarchy, when Nepal was still a Hindu state. Despite that, despite the good image India had tried to build, there was that sentiment which was being perceived by the people and the politicians in Nepal that India would always interfere in the internal matters of Nepal. In 1990s, Nepal went through a brutal civil war triggered by the Maoists, allegedly with China's backing. Because see, Nepal's location, its position makes it pivotal for both India and China. So we will discuss more about that India-China competition. But coming back to Nepal's difficult and problematic politics. For decades together, the youth in Nepal, the middle class, the lower classes, they've never seen adequate opportunities being created by the traditional political establishment. Different parties have come to power, different leaders have come and gone. Nepal has gone through a complete political constitutional transition, but none of this really mattered eventually to the people of Nepal. After the civil war ended in 2006 with India's mediation efforts, Nepal transitioned into a democratic and secular republic. Nepal started the process of drafting a new constitution and adopted the new constitution in 2015. So, based on this new constitution, elections were held, new governments were formed, new prime ministers and presidents came and went. But this made no difference absolutely for the people of Nepal. So, this pushed the youth to migrate out of the country for work opportunities, for studying opportunities. They would primarily look at India as a destination for studies and work and employment. And now you have lakhs of Nepalis finding work opportunities across the world. For example, in West Asian countries, in UAE, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, you have a very large Nepali diaspora. Same with Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. And this has affected the society of Nepal. The families have been broken apart. So, this is a long grudge, a long standing grudge that people of Nepal have against the old political establishment. That Nepali families have broken apart, they've become separated, they've moved across the world, primarily to find work opportunities which was never created within Nepal. So the Gen Z protest that we saw last year was primarily a revolt against the status quo, which was never changed by the traditional political parties. It was against the corruption within the political elite. It was against the nepotism that is often seen in Nepal's dynastic politics. So, when you look at the traditional political setup in Nepal, we have parties such as the Nepali Congress, which has historically been close to India, often seen as a pro India party because of its liberal secular leanings. Then we have communist parties such as the Maoist faction, which was previously involved in the Maoist insurgency, led by leaders like Prachanda, also known as Pushpa Kamal Dahal. So, after giving up violence and surrendering under the peace agreement that India brokered in 2006, CP and Maoist had entered mainstream politics. Prachanda became the leader of the country several times, and he was someone who could balance Nepal's ties with India and China. Despite the history of close links of the Maoist party with China, Prachanda was someone who could strike that balance and ensure that India's interests were also protected while dealing with China's growing influence. But the real challenge for us was the UML faction of the Communist Party, the Unified Marxist Leninist faction led by leaders like KP Sharma Oli, which was often seen to be pro China and anti India. So these are the traditional political setups that India has often dealt with. And given India's excessive role in Nepal's politics, it's often accused of interfering in the internal matters by siding with one party against the other, by backing one leader against the other. In many ways, that has affected and compromised India's image as well. But now things are changing, new opportunities are coming up because the people of Nepal, the voters, they have rejected all these traditional political parties, irrespective of the party being pro India or anti India or pro China. The people of Nepal have rejected the Nepali Congress, the Maoist faction, and the Unified Marxist Leninist faction. So it's a complete rejection of status quo based politics. It's a vote for change, it's a vote for reforms, it's a vote for development. Now, this is where you need to understand the genius of Balendra Shah, which has implications for India's foreign policy. As I said, Balendra Shah is not your average politician. Believe it or not, he did not even campaign for his own election. Until recently, until last year, he was the mayor of Kathmandu as an independent candidate. He hadn't joined any other political party. Just days before the election, he joined the RSP, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party, which itself is a new political setup in Nepal. The RSP itself is hardly 3-4 years old. So it's a new political party that Balen Shah joined just a couple of weeks before the election. And during the election campaign, Balen Shah did not address the public for not more than 30 minutes. Now, in countries like India or anywhere in the world, politicians, they are desperate for screen time. They are desperate for appealing to the public and connecting with the masses to seek votes. But Balen Shah took a completely different path, a very radical approach, if you ask me. He didn't campaign at all. He hardly addressed the public for a maximum of 30 minutes, not more than that. And he never openly sought votes. So, how did he win the election? It was primarily based on his approach, on his critique of traditional political parties. He even took a stand against foreign interference in Nepal, be it from India or be it from China. He built a new brand of nationalist politics rooted in Nepali pride. And he tried to project himself as a technocratic leader, someone who could bring experts into the government to solve the pressing problems of Nepal. And he has taken a clear stand to protect Nepal's sovereignty, Nepal's interests. And this is where we have implications for India's relations with Nepal. Because Balendra Shah has resisted any form of foreign external interference, be it from India or be it from China. For example, China was actively pushing a massive industrial park at Damak, which is very close to our Siliguri corridor. Balendra Shah has rejected this Chinese project. Then he also published the so called map of Greater Nepal when few elements in India were trying to push the Akhand Bharat map, trying to show Nepal as part of the so called Akhand Bharat. Balayan Shah countered this by putting a map in his office showing Greater Nepal that shows Kalapani and Susta as part of Nepal's territory. These have been symbolic moves to basically highlight his focus on Nepal's nationalist identity. Basically, he's appealing to the voters' sensibilities of not just focusing on socio-economic development, but keeping out any kind of foreign interference. So this is the brand of politics that he has cultivated. In fact, he even banned a few Bollywood movies which appeared to show Nepal in bad light. So this has been the position that he has taken, and the critique he developed against the traditional political establishment is what won him the popular support. And now he is in power with a two-third backing, a two-third majority, which is a unpredictable or a decisive mandate, right? That gives sufficient backing for the new government to bring about the changes that are desired by the people of Nepal. Now the question is, how does India deal with this new government? Should we anticipate a threat, or should we be more cautious? Should we move away from our old approach of interference and adopt a new policy where we engage with a new government, a new leader, and try to build new partnerships? So, to understand this, we need to understand the relevance of Nepal in current geopolitics, especially in South Asian geopolitics. Nepal is a very small landlocked nation, as you can see in the map here. It is sandwiched between two large Asian countries, India and China, which are arch rivals of each other. And India China have a disputed Himalayan border, and Nepal sits right in the middle of it. So, from prelims point of view, you need to remember the border states of India that share this international border with Nepal: Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Sikkim, and West Bengal. This would be the strategic Siliguri corridor, and that makes Nepal's location all the more important given that Siliguri is a choke point for India. This would be the Terai belt, the plains that extend into India, where we share very close cultural and economic ties and people to people relations. In the Terai belt, you find a native community called the Mades people or the Madesis, who are closely linked to India. The Madesis often marry into Indian families on the Indian side in the border villages of UP and Bihar. Then towards the north and central part of Nepal, you have the hilly mountainous terrain, the Pahadi region, which is of great strategic significance given that it borders Tibet. Now, as a landlocked small nation, Nepal is heavily dependent on India, almost for every important supply. Now, for example, take petrochemicals. Nepal has a near 95% dependency on Indian supplies. Since the country is landlocked, it doesn't have direct access to the sea. It is India which has provided sea access to Nepal. We allow Nepali traders to access Indian ports such as the Kolkata Haldia port or Vishakhapatnam, Paradip. These eastern ports of India are accessible to Nepali traders to connect with global markets. Nepal's currency is based on the Indian rupee. India's UPI has been rolled out in Nepal. And more importantly, we share a historical civilizational relationship with this country, linked with religion based ties through Hinduism and Buddhism. This cultural connection dates back to several centuries. So, to maintain this close relationship, India and Nepal decided in 1950 to keep the borders open. This is the full open border that we have, the only full and truly open border that we have, right? Even with Bhutan, the border is partially open, not entirely open, but with Nepal, we have a truly open border as a result of the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Given Nepal's excessive dependency on India, right, it's essential to keep the border roads open in order to provide for free movement of goods and free movement of people. In fact, we have implemented a complete soft border arrangement. We don't have hard border controls. The border is not fenced. The border guarding forces like the Sashastra Seema Bal, they don't carry heavy weaponry. They can't open fire along the border areas. And there is free immigration which is provided that enables visa-free travel between the two countries. Right? For Indians to enter Nepal, you don't need a visa. Maybe you don't even need a passport. Any government identification like a voter ID or Aadhaar is also sufficient. And it's a reciprocal treatment, a national treatment, which is extended from both sides. Nepal gives similar treatment to Indians, and India returns the favor. In fact, Nepali youth are eligible for few government exams in India, including your UPSC exams. Right? The Indian Army still maintains the Gorkha regiment with recruitment from the Nepali Gorkha community. So that is the deep rooted bond that we share. Nepali students and youth come to India to study. Nepal's working population depends on India heavily to find work opportunities. So there is an unbreakable bond that exists, a very deep rooted cultural and people to people relationship. That's why many former diplomats, they often joke about this relationship and they call it roti beti ke sambandh, meaning Nepal is dependent on India for roti and beti, bread and for marital relations. Since Madhesis marry into Indian families, right, they often find a bride on the Indian side. They label this relationship as roti beti ke sambandh. So that is the extent of close relationship that we share. But one big challenge we have faced here is the growing and ever rising presence of China. Since 1970s, China has been posing a significant threat. Especially after the 1962 war, China has been very aggressive under the five finger policy of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong's five finger policy is a strategic move by China. China believes under the five finger policy that if Tibet is like the palm of your hand, then Tibet has five fingers, five extensions. That is Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, then as well as Arunachal Pradesh. And these extensions are essentially considered as the five fingers, including Bhutan. And China believes in meddling and interfering and destabilizing these five extensions. And also, given the fact that Tibetan Buddhist refugees are hosted in Nepal as well, China looks at Nepal as a target to keep an eye on Tibetan Buddhist activities and the political activities of the Buddhist refugees. So since 1970s, China has been very proactive here, and especially after India fully integrated Sikkim into the Indian Union, which was seen as a controversial move and criticized by countries like Nepal and China. Nepal-China relations have flourished as well. China has been known to be involved with backing and sponsoring the Maoist movement. China has invested massive amounts of money into key infrastructure projects. Nepal has even joined the Belt and Road Initiative of China in 2017. And China is building roads, railway lines, bridges. It has interconnected digital infrastructure as well. It's involved in key commercial and cultural projects. For example, China was involved in the revival of the Lumbini site, the birthplace of Lord Gautam Buddha, the very birthplace of Buddhism as such. And though India was keenly interested to redevelop Lumbini, China managed to overtake India and was involved in this cultural project. It is extending a railway line all the way from Lhasa in Tibet, deep into Nepal, reaching almost the borders of India, reaching the borders of UP and Bihar, which is even seen as a strategic security threat from the Indian side. China has recently invested in the Pokhara International Airport. China is investing heavily in Nepal's hydropower sector. As a Himalayan state, Nepal has tremendous hydropower potential. Right? Even India has been seeking to make such investments in hydropower projects, but China has been more successful. So this is where India faces a very big challenge due to rising Chinese influence. So given these new political changes in Nepal and given the rising influence of China, how does India navigate this in the coming weeks, in the coming months? What should be the way forward for India? Right, that's the final point of discussion. See, India should resist the temptation to meddle with internal politics of neighboring countries. Many experts also agree that in the past, India has been, to some extent, playing a role in the internal politics of our neighboring nations. So, the writers of both these articles, especially KV Rajan, the former Indian ambassador to Nepal, he is strongly of the belief that we need not worry about the new governments, the new leaders who are coming in, what's their individual ideology, because India can project itself as the most ideal development partner. And that itself is our biggest leverage to ensure that our interests, our economic, security, and strategic interests are protected. Now, take for example, countries like Bangladesh, countries like Sri Lanka, or even Maldives. Now, in recent years, haven't we seen pro India leaders and governments being removed in these countries and anti India governments, anti India leaders coming to power? In Maldives, Mohammad Muizu, when he won the elections in 2023, it was primarily on the basis of an anti India campaign. He pushed the India out campaign. And the pro India party, the Maldivian Democratic Party under Ibrahim Soleh, lost the election. And what appeared to be an anti India government under an anti India leader came into power. In the initial months, yes, there was some friction between India and Maldives. Tensions also came up. But now look how India has managed to rebrand this relationship. India used its development leverage. When Maldives faced an economic crunch, India rushed in with assistance, supporting its economy. Maldives has a history of going through such economic crisis, and each and every time India has been the first responder. So India has shown that leverage, the economic influence, the developmental support that we can provide, how India can be a net security provider for small countries in the region. This is something India has established with a lot of credibility. And now the approach of Mohammad Muizu and his government has completely changed. And now he is balancing the ties of Maldives with India, with other hostile powers like China, Pakistan, and the others. Now that's all India wants, right? We don't want them to be anti-China or anti-Pakistan. As long as Indian interests are protected, as long as neighboring governments are balancing their ties with all the other countries and protecting India's core interests, then India has no other issues. Look at what happened in Sri Lanka. The Rajapaksa brothers who were in power, who were always seen as pro-China leaders, they were toppled following the economic crisis. And India rushed in with economic assistance to prop up the Sri Lankan economy. So over the last 4 years, we have pumped more than $4 billion worth of investments and financial support to back the Sri Lankan economy. And the new party which came to power under Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the JVP, was previously known to be an anti-India militant group. The JVP was a notorious militant organization known to hold sentiments against India, known to carry out even attacks against Indian interests. But today the party has completely reformed, and its new leader, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, has been very active to protect the India-Sri Lanka relationship. Right? So Anura Kumara Dissanayake in Sri Lanka is not choosing sides between India and China. Sri Lanka still remains close to China while protecting its close ties with India and ensuring that India's core interests are safeguarded. And we are likely to see the same thing in Bangladesh. After Sheikh Hasina's regime was toppled, India was very worried with Muhammad Yunus and the policies of the Muhammad Yunus regime. But now we have the BNP back in power under a new leader, Tariq Rahman. But historically, the BNP has been a pro-Pakistan and anti-India party, right? Tariq Rahman's parents, both Khalida Zia and Ziaur Rahman, they were known to hold favorable sentiments towards Pakistan while adopting an anti-India policy in the past, in the 1980s and 1990s. But now this appears to be changing. The BNP appears to have taken a more moderate stand. Tariq Rahman has reached out to India, and ever since his recent election victory, India and BNP are trying to revive this relationship and work towards common goals and common interests. So we can do exactly the same in Nepal. We need to project India as a reliable, trusted development partner for small neighboring countries like Nepal. See, right now, the leader, Balendra Shah, who has made so many promises to the voters, there's a lot of expectation on him that he will create jobs, that he'll bring development, he will lead to upliftment of Nepal's youth. So on his own, he can't deliver these commitments, right? Internally, he might have managed to bring the voters together, but without dealing with current geopolitics and the neighborhood environment, he can't ensure that stability is brought back into Nepal and growth is brought back into Nepal. So, for focusing on growth and development, Balendra Shah would require the support of India. As I told you, Nepal's economy is heavily dependent on India, and that itself is our leverage, which means we have to resist the temptation to meddle in their internal matters. We need not take sides between the RSP, Nepali Congress, and the communist parties, right? We can completely stay away from their internal politics. We should have no role in that and just focus on assisting the new government, building good ties with the new leadership, and create a mutually beneficial partnership. So, if we follow the same playbook that we have used in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Maldives, then definitely India has a great opportunity to address the issues that are pending in the India Nepal relationship, including the pending border issue. So, this is what we need to learn from these two articles. So, please take up this practice question and practice your mains answer writing. Now, let's move to the next topic. On the supplement page, there is a detailed article on semiconductors. See, these science and tech articles can be very, very important for your prelims and mains. Many times, if you look at PYQs, you will realize that UPSC has picked direct science and tech questions from articles from the Hindu newspaper. That's why if you notice in my Hindu analysis, I never leave any important science and tech related article. We always try to cover that because a lot of times direct questions have been asked from these articles. So there is a article in the supplement page that focuses on a new research breakthrough, a new scientific breakthrough in the field of semiconductivity. So let's understand what are semiconductors, what do you mean by semiconductivity, what are its applications, and what is this new breakthrough and what potential does it hold? See, when we talk about superconductors, it refers to a very unique and strange phenomena that occurs in some materials under certain ideal conditions. If very cold temperature and high pressure is maintained, certain materials, they display almost zero electrical resistance, which means electricity or current can pass through with zero loss theoretically. And such materials are called superconductors, right? Superconductors, and the phenomena is called as superconductivity. They even display other unique phenomena at this level, at this stage, which includes the Meissner effect, where they expel all the magnetic field quite effectively. And this has application with regard to magnetic levitation, right? So you can achieve almost frictionless high-speed travel through maglev trains. It has applications in the healthcare industry for new age MRI machines. It can be used in particle accelerators. The same concept can be used to develop ultra sensitive particle accelerators, which can further particle physics and our understanding of the universe. It has numerous applications in the energy industry with regard to power transmission, with regard to renewable energy. See, right now, the world is losing billions and billions of dollars worth of electricity because of transmission loss, because all the material that we use at room temperature at normal atmospheric pressure, they have slight amount or high degree of electrical resistance, which results in loss of power during transmission. So the electricity which is generated with such large investments, a large part of it is being lost due to transmission losses. So imagine a material, a superconductor, right? If it displays zero electrical resistance, it can take out that loss almost entirely, right? In theory, and it can enable transmission across large distances without any loss, which results in better utilization of the electricity which is being produced. So this has very, very big implications with regard to power transmission, with regard to shift towards much cleaner renewable forms of energy, and it can transform many industries. It has a lot of industrial applications, as I said, new age MRI machines in the healthcare sector, or using the maglev principles for better efficient transportation. So some materials do display this property under certain set of conditions. For example, if you take copper oxide and different alloys of copper oxide, they do display this ability to superconduct, where they offer no electrical resistance at all. And this usually occurs at very, very low temperatures, nearing absolute zero, which is minus 273 degrees Celsius. And also, you need to maintain very, very high pressure. Unimaginably high pressure may need to be maintained to make the material a superconducting material. But however, in a laboratory setting, maybe this is feasible, right? When you're testing different materials, and it's possible to maintain extremely low temperature in the range of, let's say, minus 270 degrees, and maintain high pressure as well. And a material can become a superconductor. But however, this has no real world application, right? Because if you have to use that material for magnetic levitation, for MRI machines, for power transmission, you can't maintain such low temperatures in the real world. You can't maintain such high pressure constantly in the real world. So right now, whatever research is happening in superconductivity is largely restricted to research labs. It has no real world application because such low temperature and high pressure condition cannot be sustained. It cannot be maintained for a real world application. This is the biggest scientific challenge that researchers are trying to overcome. Like, how can we have a material which will become a superconductor at room temperature and at normal atmospheric pressure? If at all we can make such a material, or discover such a material, or discover a process through which a material can be transformed into this, and it can remain as a superconductor at normal room temperature and normal pressure conditions, then that would be the biggest breakthrough, because that would lead to complete transformation of the entire world itself. Now, this is where researchers are stuck for many, many decades. In fact, superconductivity was discovered in 1911, and the biggest breakthrough happened in 1980s and 1990s. And after that, there has been no big breakthrough in superconductivity. For example, in 1993, a team of researchers, they managed to use a type of copper oxide called Hg1223, and they achieved superconductivity at much higher temperature at minus 140 degrees. I know minus 140 is still super cold, but compared to absolute zero, compared to minus 273, minus 140 is much hotter, right? So in 1993, researchers managed to use a copper oxide material known as Hg1223, and at minus 140 degrees, they achieved superconductivity. But this was achieved when tremendous pressure was applied. There have been few other research initiatives across the world where researchers have used different types of alloys and materials and achieved superconductivity at minus 13 degrees Celsius as well. But you know how much pressure they had applied? The pressure was almost the equivalent of the pressure that you see at the Earth's core. At the core of the Earth, the kind of pressure that is seen, that was the extent of pressure that was applied to achieve superconductivity at minus 13 degrees Celsius. So this only has research value. It has no real world application value. How will you maintain such extraordinary high pressure in real world? How will you maintain such extreme low temperatures? It's not feasible, right? But however, a team of researchers from the University of Houston in the United States, they have achieved a huge breakthrough with a new method, a new process known as pressure quenching. They've adopted a new process called pressure quenching, which can become the next big breakthrough in superconductivity. So they've developed a protocol called the pressure quench protocol, the PQP. So what they've done is that they've basically taken Hg1223, placed it in a diamond anvil cell, right? A very small crystal of copper oxide, Hg1223, was placed in a diamond anvil cell, and it was super cooled to around minus 123 degrees Celsius under tremendous pressure of up to 30 billion pascals. So at this point, the material was almost set to become a superconductor. But the researchers went ahead to the second stage. In the second stage, they further dropped the temperature. They cooled this crystal to minus 269 degrees, which is just very close to your absolute zero, right? It's slightly higher than your absolute zero, that is minus 273 degrees. So once it was super cool to minus 269, they suddenly removed this pressure, right? They quench the material of the pressure, right? They take out that pressure all of a sudden, rapidly releasing that pressure. Now what happens? Since the material has cooled down to minus 269, the atoms have no energy left. The material would have become so cold that the atoms have no energy left to relax and to go back to its previous form and shape. So it continues to hold the structure for some amount of time where it becomes a superconductor without the high pressure, right? At low temperature, without high pressure, the material became a superconductor. This itself is seen as a big breakthrough because previously, researchers have achieved superconductivity in the range of minus 140 to minus 180 degrees Celsius. But this was always with the application of high pressure. Unimaginably high pressure was applied. Now, in this case, for the first time, researchers have been able to remove the pressure entirely, and just with low temperature, they've been able to achieve superconductivity for a brief period of time. And the measurements are also quite promising. The material displayed 78% of the bulk material becoming a superconductor. Because see, sometimes what happens when a material is subjected to such high pressure and low temperature, it deforms, it ruptures internally at a molecular level. And you have these filaments which get created, like small channels that get created at a microscopic level, where current will seamlessly pass through without resistance. So when you measure the current coming out, you will assume that it is offering zero electrical resistance. But in reality, that current is flowing only through the filaments, through the small microscopic channels which were caused because of the deformation of the material. So you need superconductivity at the bulk level. The entire material, that entire crystal which is used in this test should display superconductivity, right? Current passing through some microscopic channels will not help you in real world application. So in this case, the researchers have proven that this was not some surface level superconductivity or filamentary effect. It was not because of microscopic filaments that current was passing through without resistance. It has displayed 78% bulk superconductivity. 78% of the whole material became a superconductor even after the pressure was removed and only the temperature was being maintained. Now, this can help further research because to maintain extremely low temperatures, you need liquid helium, which is super expensive. Many people don't know this. Liquid helium is another critical resource, as important as lithium. And right now, Qatar is one of the leading producers of helium, and helium production has taken a massive hit. It's used across various industries, from semiconductors to superconductors to many other domains. So to maintain temperatures of minus 260, 270 degrees, you need liquid helium, which is very expensive. It's in short supply. But if you can achieve this superconductivity at, let's say, minus 120 to 150 degrees centigrade, then you can even use liquid nitrogen, which is much cheaper and easier as a coolant. Liquid nitrogen is much cheaper compared to liquid helium and easily available as well. So, by using the pressure quench protocol, researchers not only removed the pressure, maintained superconductivity, they even reduced the temperature back to minus 122 degrees Celsius, and still the material was a superconductor. This has been peer reviewed and it has been replicated repeatedly to cross check that there are no errors, and that is why this is such a big breakthrough. The reason why such caution is being exercised before publicizing this research is because recently there have been lot of controversies in the field of superconductive conductivity. We have seen many false results being brought out in US, in China, in South Korea. In the last 3 4 years itself, there have been many incidents where researchers have falsified data. They have falsified the data deliberately to claim success, that they achieved superconductivity at room temperature and normal pressure. Later, it was proven to be a lie. There have been incidents in South Korea where researchers claim to have developed a new material which would be a superconductor at normal temperature and room pressure. But again, this was disproven because it could not be replicated. Right? Any scientific breakthrough, for it to be considered as valid, it should be peer reviewed and it should be replicable. Right? It can't be a one time thing. It has to be a repeat result and it should give the same exact result each time. So, in the case of superconductor research, there have been many controversies in the recent past where researchers have tried using shortcuts, manipulating data, fabricating the paper itself, or coming out with flawed methods which have not been replicable. That's why the scientific community is very cautious. But this time, there is more credibility attached to this work because this research was led by a world renowned scientist, Ching Wu Shu, who works at the University of Houston, who led this scientific study. Now, it is the same researcher who has pioneered some of the biggest breakthroughs in the field of superconductivity. In 1987, it was his team that pioneered a new material called YbCO. Please write this down. This can come as a prelims question. What is YbCO? Yttrium barium copper oxide. It's a material synthesized in 1987 by Professor Shu's team, which is primarily used in superconductor research. At minus 180 degrees, YbCO becomes a superconductor. Clear? So there is a lot of credibility attached with this researcher, with his team, and that's why this breakthrough is attracting a lot of attention. So there might be a question on pressure quenching protocol. What is it related to? Or what is a superconductor? What are its applications? These are some basic questions you can expect in your prelims. And also take up a mains question. And please practice your mains answer writing. Now, coming to the next topic. Donald Trump has again flipped his statements. Over the last week, we've been discussing how Trump is making new claims, new statements each day, right? From claiming victory to claiming that Iran's military is completely obliterated, and later saying he will resume fresh attacks, launch more major attacks on Iran. He even gave a deadline, which we discussed yesterday, right? He had placed Iran on a 48-hour deadline. And if it failed to meet the deadline and agree to completely surrender unconditionally, he had threatened Iran to strike its power plants and energy infrastructure. Now, within 24 to 36 hours, he has again flipped. And Trump yesterday posted on Truth Social that talks and negotiations have been going on between US and Iran. I mean, before this, nobody had ever reported about this. There was no idea that any such talks existed between US and Iran. Because as claimed by Trump himself, Iran's leadership has almost been wiped out. Right from the Ayatollah to the senior members of IRGC to senior ministers and officials, most of them have been taken out. So if at all US has engaged in any kind of talks with Iran, there is no clarity as to who is the point person, as to who represents the leadership right now of the Iranian regime. There's no idea. There's no clarity on this. So US has said that talks have been going very well, and Trump has said that talks are going very strong. Right? You can imagine his kind of language, and he has basically said that there will be a 5-day pause in the plan to strike Iran's power plants. So US is basically pausing some of the military strikes, which were all set to begin probably from today. So Trump has said we are pausing this plan, pushing it by 5 days, giving chance for diplomacy and negotiations to work. Now, how far is this true? We are not sure. Markets reacted very positively, right? We saw a very, very big drop in oil prices. We saw a complete recovery happening in the American markets as well. Billions of dollars of wealth was created. But within minutes, Iran rejected all the claims made by Donald Trump. Multiple sources in Iran are denying any such talks or negotiations having been taken place. The speaker of Iran's parliament has categorically denied that Iran is talking to United States. Iran's state media and media outlets aligned with Iran's regime, even they have denied any negotiations. The IRGC, in fact, has resumed new attacks against Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar. And Israel also launched fresh attacks yesterday after Trump posted this on social media. So, honestly, there's no clarity as to what's happening. But according to Trump, there is a 5 day pause for the American strikes on Iranian power plants. Iran has promised to retaliate with its full might and even target critical infrastructure across the region if US were to escalate this conflict. Iran can easily take aim at the desalination plants, destroy the remaining oil gas facilities across the Persian Gulf region, and it may never lift the blockade at Hormuz Strait. So, this can have a shocking ripple effect, which will have a lasting long term implication. But as of now, Trump has called for further talks, and there has been some interesting developments in the last 12 hours. After Trump made this proposal, Pakistan has become super active. Asim Munir, the army chief and the sort of new supreme leader in Pakistan, he has reached out to Donald Trump. And according to reports coming in from the White House, Pakistan is likely to act as a mediator in these talks between US and Iran. Again, these are unverified reports, but very strong sources are indicating that most likely Pakistan is like looking to project itself as a mediator over here. Because see, traditionally, Qatar is the go-to negotiator in the region. But right now, that's not feasible because Qatar itself is part of the conflict. Even Saudi and UAE have often acted as mediators. But since they are involved in the conflict, hosting the American military bases, and Iran is targeting them, they can't be seen as neutral negotiators. So the next best bet for Trump is Pakistan. And maybe that explains Trump's investments in cultivating Asim Munir over the last year, especially since Operation Sindoor. So, will Pakistan play that role? I mean, that would have serious implications for India. If Pakistan were to position itself as a potential neutral mediator between US and Iran, it's likely to gain prominent influence. And more importantly, it's likely to gain the goodwill of Donald Trump, which could possibly hurt India in the long run. So these are some developments we need to watch out for. But as I said, things are very dynamic, very fluid. It's very hard to say what's actually happening. But and also there is so much flip flop from the United States, especially. But even Netanyahu has issued a press statement yesterday saying Israel is also willing to end the war if Iran agrees to the conditions and terms laid down by them, which means Iran has to agree to give up its nuclear weapons program, make a commitment, and give up all its nuclear weapons stockpile, and also take other restrictions, including the sponsorship of proxy or extremist groups in the region. But Iran's regime is unlikely to accept them. But based on what Trump is saying, maybe the Trump administration is in touch with someone, with a leader who's seen as acceptable to Israel and United States. You never know, right? This is what happened in Venezuela. Once they took out Nicolas Maduro, the vice president of Venezuela managed to work with Donald Trump and his administration, and now US is comfortable in dealing with the new Venezuelan leadership, right? The new VP, who has become the interim president of Venezuela, has been seen as a more accommodative leader who can work in line with American interests. Maybe something like that is being manufactured in Iran, where US probably is in touch with some leaders within maybe IRGC or within the Iranian Shia theocracy, and they want to prop them up as the new leadership with Western backing and Western support. But this will all be based on a lot of ifs and buts. Uh, Only if Iran agrees to completely abandon the nuclear weapons program and hand over all the weapons stockpile, right, all the material it has enriched, and only if it agrees probably to stop sponsoring Hamas, Hezbollah, and the others, only then any such ceasefire is likely to take effect. But again, uh, you can never rule out the possibility. But as of now, things are very dicey. So after the announcements were made, fresh attacks have begun. Well, Trump was claiming a pause to the attacks, and he's saying talks are going on, a peace is about to be achieved. Parallelly, Israel, Iran both have resumed fresh attacks. Israel launched few strikes overnight, and Iran has retaliated, targeting new facilities in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Saudi Arabia, and UAE. So as the war escalates, Iran is now threatening to start mining the Persian Gulf. Now, this is going to become a long term threat if at all Iran does this. Now, let's say the peace talks don't go through, right? And let's say the war continues and it escalates further. Then Iran is saying that they will mine the entire Persian Gulf, including critical access points. So, if they lay the mines within the waters and along the coastline, this could render shipping impossible through the Persian Gulf and Hormuz Strait. Because see, mines can detonate at any time. They're triggered primarily by pressure, right? And it's very, very hard to demine. We have seen in previous conflicts, whenever mining is done, be it mines being laid on land or in water to deny access, most mines will be left behind and they continue to explode many years, many decades later as well. In fact, there is an international convention as well to deal with the hazards of mines and how they become a major threat after the conflict ends as well. So any mining of Persian Gulf and Hormuz Strait will be disastrous for shipping through the region because these mines can explode at any point, causing a major threat for shipping itself. Now, let's look at a related article on page 16. The International Energy Agency, which we have studied in the last couple of weeks, it has made a very interesting observation. According to the chief, the head of International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, the current oil and gas shortage that the world is seeing, it is the biggest ever that we have experienced. It basically has overtaken the oil shortage that was experienced in 1970s. It has overtaken the gas shortage that was seen during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. See, in 1970s, there were two major oil crisis situations that developed. One in 1973, one in 1979. In 1973, OPEC countries, they stopped production as US supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War. The major oil producing and exporting nations of the OPEC, they halted production, resulting in the massive oil crisis, which fundamentally changed West Asian geopolitics and the US focus on West Asian monarchies, right? And similarly, 1979, following the Iranian Revolution, as Iran's production took a hit, global oil supplies were also affected. Now, if you take the drop in production in 1973 and 79 period and add it up together, even then, the current production loss in 2026 is much, much higher than the combined production loss seen during Iranian Revolution and the 1973 oil crisis. According to the International Energy Agency, during the 1973-79 oil crisis, we lost around 10 million barrels of oil produced per day. Right now, because of the paralyzing of the Hormuz Strait and the direct attack on energy facilities, we are losing 11 million barrels of oil production per day, which means the current oil shock has surpassed the combined effect of the 1973 and 79 oil crisis. The same story exists with regard to gas production and gas supplies. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, gas production dropped by 75 billion cubic meters. And especially Europe took a massive hit, as European countries are heavily dependent on Russian gas, which primarily is supplied through Ukrainian territory. Right now, because of the Iranian war, gas production has lost 140 billion cubic meters, making it one of the biggest energy crises that we have ever witnessed. Almost 40 plus energy plants and facilities have been severely damaged across 9 countries. Now, this is the data coming from IEA. For the first time, we have confirmation that in countries like Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Iran, critical oil and gas facilities have been almost permanently damaged. It'll take years to rebuild the infrastructure which has been damaged. More than 40 critical energy assets have reported a severe to very severe damage, and the lasting effect will be felt in the coming months and years. Next, the central government has shown the intention to bring out a new amendment in order to introduce a early delimitation exercise so that women's reservation can be introduced before the next Lok Sabha election. Now, this is another big development. See, recently the Modi government pushed a bill in the parliament to provide for 33% reservation for women candidates in Lok Sabha elections and state assembly elections. Right? The Women's Reservation Act 2023 was seen as a landmark legislation, a breakthrough to increase women's participation in politics. But however, its implementation was a major cause for concern. Because for implementing women's reservation, there was a need for a delimitation exercise. And what's delimitation? Delimitation is basically drawing the boundary of constituencies. Under Article 82, the Parliament enacts a delimitation act after each census, ideally. And the mandate of such a delimitation commission is to draw the boundaries of electoral constituencies while ensuring that each constituency roughly has the same population to ensure equitable representation. So, based on such a delimitation exercise, after the next census was carried out, only then the reserved seats for women could have been designated. The delimitation commission will identify the reserved constituencies as well. For example, for SC, ST reservation, it is the same delimitation commission which draws up the boundaries of constituencies and identifies the reserved constituencies. So to implement women's reservation, identification of the reserved seats was necessary. So as per the previous plan, it could happen only after the next census. And as you know, the census in 2021 was delayed. It was never conducted because of the pandemic and various other political reasons. Just yesterday, the Home Ministry published an ad in the Hindu newspaper and other major media outlets stating that from 2026 to 2027, the census exercise, the enumeration is going to begin. It will get started. The data will come out only by 2028-29, right? So only after this, a delimitation commission could have taken up the exercise. It would have taken at least a couple of years minimum to bring out a report, by 2031 maybe. So the hopeful date for implementation of women's reservation was at least 2034 and beyond. So this itself had generated a lot of criticism that for more than a decade, even after the passing of the law, you are depriving women of the reservation because census was not done and delimitation can't be done without it. So now the government is trying to address this. See, till date, 4 delimitation acts have been passed in 52, 62, 72 and 2002. Right? Post the delimitation of 1972, further redrawing of boundaries and increase in the number of Lok Sabha seats was paused. It was frozen to pave the path for population control and stabilization till 2025. So next delimitation was frozen until 2025. The change in Lok Sabha seats was completely frozen because some states which were having better family control programs, which had stabilized their population, they would see a reduction in their seats, representation in the parliament. Whereas states which had failed at population control, which had increased their population, they would get more seats, increasing their political weight. So this had led to a big divide between southern states and northern states. States like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu were worried that they would lose seats in parliament, whereas states like UP and others would gain a disproportionate number of seats. So now the government is committing that it will seek an amendment under the Women's Reservation Act based on old census data, based on 2011 census data. Since the new census is going to take time, right? The data will come out maybe in 3-4 years, then a delimitation commission, which will take another probably 2-3 years, which means at least a 10-year delay to implement women's reservation. So now the government is considering an amendment which might be introduced in this budget session itself, or maybe a special session will also be called. And using the previous census data of 2011 census, a delimitation exercise is likely to be carried out. Now, this can become very controversial as well, because most likely Lok Sabha seats are going to be increased from 543 to 816, with 273 seats reserved for women candidates. Now, the government is promising that southern states will not lose out, that proportionality and equitable representation will be ensured. Even though old census data will be used, this will, in a way, address some of the concerns of southern states because they're worried more about the new census data, which might show further decline in their population. So they'll be happy if old census data is used. And the center is promising that through the new delimitation exercise, proportionality will be ensured and all states are likely to see a 50% rise in their overall seat allocation in the parliament. So as a result of this process, right, it will pave the way for delimitation commission to identify the reserved seats for women candidates as well, which will provide for full implementation of women's reservation in politics. So let's see whether the bill comes through, because see, right now the details are not available. The draft amendment is not in the public domain. Once we have it, we can have a more detailed discussion on the topic. Next, the government has launched 3 new initiatives to promote orange economy. What is orange economy? Orange economy refers to creators economy, the economy or industry built on creativity. So this includes content creation. It includes new forms of media that primarily circulates on social media platforms. So the government of India is very keen to build India as a hub of orange economy, to create the right ecosystem for a creator's economy. In fact, many countries have done it. Countries like United Arab Emirates, for example, it's a hub of content creators. The Modi government also is prioritizing this push, and new initiatives are being rolled out to help India emerge as a leading hub of orange economy. So please note down the initiatives, can be very, very important for prelims exam. The first initiative is the National AI Skilling Initiative in partnership with Google and YouTube. India is partnering with big tech firms, Google and YouTube, and they will introduce a free skill development program. They will basically run a course, Google and YouTube, in coordination with the government of India, will run a course for content creators, and it will be implemented in 2 phases. First phase will be implemented from March to June of this year. Second phase will be implemented in the later half of this year. So in phase 1, basic coaching and training will be provided through Google career certificates on AI foundation models, how AI tools can be used, generative AI, to create content. The very basics of content creation will be taught. In second phase, more advanced concepts, including the right prompts for AI tools like Gemini, and how tools like Gemini can be used to create content, to make shorts and reels, and build a new creators economy. And the government's priority is to use the new army of creators to focus on India's diversity, India's rich culture, and act as India's voices. So the National AI Skilling Initiative could give a big boost for orange economy and the creators economy in the country. The second big initiative being rolled out is the My Waves platform. What is My Waves? Think of it like Netflix for content creators, but it's government run. So government is setting up a new platform, like a OTT platform, where content creators can post, upload their content, stream their content. And this would be a government led initiative, right? Mainly to help creators to have a free platform with a big access across the country with a big audience. The government is pushing a OTT kind of platform through My Waves initiative. And the third initiative is to increase the reach of Doordarshan channels by providing inbuilt satellite tuners in television sets so that consumers across the country, viewers across the country can access DD free dish through which they can access all the channels of Doordarshan, which means in the future your TV sets will come with an inbuilt satellite tuner so that the reach of DD channels can increase across the country. These are the three new initiatives that are rolled out by the government to boost orange economy. Next, a dictator has reappointed himself. Not referring to Donald Trump, referring to Kim Jong-un of North Korea. The so-called Parliament of North Korea has carried out a scripted election, right? Because DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, there's nothing democratic about it. Though the country's name begins with the word democratic, trust me, there's nothing democratic about this country. Back in 1948, the grandfather of Kim Jong-un, Mr. Kim Sung, he turned the country into authoritarian dictatorship following the Second World War and the breakout of the Korean War in the Korean Peninsula. Since then, North Korea has become an isolated communist state. And for 3 generations, the same family has been in complete control of the government. Next, it was his son. Now it's his grandson, Kim Jong-un, who remains in power. And by the way, he's grooming his sister and his daughter as well to assume leadership positions very soon. So a namesake election was held, like what happens in our neighboring country, Pakistan as well. Pakistan also is a democracy, right? Elections happen, but you know how elections are controlled in Pakistan by the deep state. At least in Pakistan, it's not out in the open. But in North Korea, this is merely a formality, right? The outcome is predetermined. Everyone knows Kim Jong-un will again be reappointed. But they claim to be a democracy. So just for the sake of it, they have done this exercise again in the Supreme People's Assembly. And the authoritarian leader has been reappointed. So, of late, we have seen increasing aggression from North Korea with regular launch of ballistic missiles. And as you know, it possesses nuclear weapons. And it continues to pose a threat to South Korea and Japan. So, tensions remain high in the region. And United States also has a tense relationship with North Korea. In his first regime, Trump had met with Kim Jong-un, but they didn't achieve any breakthrough. Now, it needs to be seen whether Trump might open fresh talks with North Korea or maybe resort to some sort of escalation with North Korea. Coming to the prelim section, just a couple of articles and we'll end the session after this. In the supplement page, there's a very unique bird which species which is mentioned in the news. The Hudsonian godwit. The Hudsonian godwit is one of the most remarkable birds that you will ever come across. You can see that it's a pretty small bird. It's not a very large sized bird. It's a shore bird primarily, found on coastal shorelines. But it's known for its remarkable migration. It carries out one of the biggest, largest migration that is known to us. It flies all the way from the Arctic Circle, from the northern parts of Canada, across the Americas region, towards the southern part of South America, towards Argentina, Peru, etc. You know, the distance of this journey is at least 30,000 kilometers. The distance it travels is at least 30,000 kilometers, and it is done on a yearly basis. Every year it does it. It's also known to fly almost 10 to 11,000 kilometers at a stretch without any stop for food, rest, or water. This is a remarkable ability of the Hudsonian godwit. But however, this remarkable bird is facing a serious threat. On the IUCN Red List, it is listed as a vulnerable bird species, and its population has declined by 95% in the last 4 decades. Research has shown that anthropogenic activities, climate change, global warming, and the changing patterns of oceanic currents, atmospheric wind currents is impacting such delicate bird species as well. Now, this bird is in the news because right now countries are meeting in Brazil to focus on conserving and protecting such migratory species. There is an international convention under the UN known as the CMS, the Convention on Migratory Species. So, Brazil is hosting another important environment related summit from 23rd of March, and countries are looking to designate at least 42 species of animals, birds, etc., for greater international protection under the Convention on Migratory Species. So, let's pick up some basic facts about this convention. This UN convention was brought out in 1979, and it's also known as the Bonn Convention because it was signed in the city of Bonn in Germany. So, as the name itself tells you, it's a environment related convention focused on conserving migratory species of animals and birds. It will focus on terrestrial, marine, and avian migratory species. So, be it an animal, a fish, a bird, along with their migratory habitats, everything falls under the conservation mandate of the CMS Convention. So, under the convention, the countries maintain two appendices, Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. Those species which are listed under Appendix 1, they get the highest protection as they are considered to be threatened with the risk of extinction. And those who require greater protection through international cooperation between the member countries and the range countries, those species are listed under Appendix 2. So this is what you need to know about the conservation on the UN Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species. So with this, I bring my discussion to an end. If you like the session, do press the like button, share the video with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.